Hey guys! I'm hoping that we're going to be okay today. I said yesterday I was going to do this live based on the fact that I could talk. Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed that the cold doesn't affect me too much. I really apologise if my voice is just grating on you today. Try to stick with it because I think this is going to be really useful information. But I guess I could send you some cliff notes if it's really annoying. Anyway, I hope you've had a fantastic week. And send me any questions if you have them as I'm talking through things because, a bit of brain fog with the head cold. So I might not explain things as well as I could. Or, sometimes we just need a bit of clarification and that's fine. So yeah, send me any questions if you have them. But today's live is going to be all about processed foods. So I talk a lot about whole foods. I tend to recommend to people, just generally, without looking too specifically at their diet, my recommendation is generally to try to get your nutrients from whole foods. And then on the other hand, I'm also saying, you don't have to cut any foods out of your diet. And usually it's those processed foods that we don't want to cut out. So maybe a little bit of confliction there. So I just wanted to talk about that today. The reasoning and the messaging behind those two things. And maybe get you thinking a little bit differently about processed foods. Maybe not. Let's see. So yeah, I always try and make the recommendation of people eating whole foods as much as possible. And the reason for that really, when we think about it, it's pretty obvious. Whole foods evolved with us. So when we were doing the talk about micronutrients, we talked about how foods tend to have the right balance of micronutrients in them. And that's not a mistake. That's not an accident. That's happened because those foods have evolved with us. We have been designed as well. We've evolved to eat those types of foods and to thrive off them. So when you think of it like that, it's kind of obvious and it makes a lot of sense that you would want to eat foods that come from the earth. However, that doesn't make a lot of money. There's not loads of money in carrots growing by themselves. So manufacturers like to make food, and I don't want to turn this into a whole conspiracy theory. That's not what this is. But this is just literally facts that manufacturers are literally just there to make the money. They're not interested in our health. Sometimes they might say that to us. They might sell it to us and say, oh, this has got added vitamins. This has got added iron. This is really good for you. It's just a marketing ploy to get you to buy it. It's not because they've added those things because you were missing them from foods that grew from the ground or, from animals or whatever else. So, and here's a really good fact to prove that. Did you know that 90% of food distribution is controlled by 10 companies? Just 10. And all the money's going to them. So if that doesn't prove that it's not really for us, I don't know what is. Anyway, so why are processed foods going to be a problem then? Because you know that I don't advocate cutting out foods. I don't ever say, right, if you want to lose weight or if you want to get healthy, you have to cut out this certain type of food. Now, that's for psychological reasons more than anything else. There's no physiological reason why we should have to eat processed foods. They literally do not serve our body in any way better than any other whole foods. It's just a mental aspect of things. As to why we dive into that and why we say you don't have to cut out processed foods. But physiologically, there is nothing happening inside that those processed foods are any better for us. So we do not need them. Now, I just want to talk about what I really mean by processed. Before we really get into this, I want to make it really clear because everything's a process. The food doesn't come straight from the ground, straight into our stomach. Chewing it is a process. If I dig up a carrot, it'd be very bizarre if I dug up an apple. If I dig up a carrot, I peel it, I chop it into batons, I roast it, I've processed it. There are some processes there. But I think we would agree that the processes of chopping up a carrot are very different to eating chocolate that literally wasn't a food before and has just been manufactured from basically nothing. And those are the sorts of foods we're going to be talking about today. The ones that come in wrappers, the ones that have ingredients we can't pronounce, the ones that don't look like anything that would have grown naturally. Those sorts of foods, that was what we're going to talk about. So the first reason as to why they're a problem is when we think about whole foods, so fruits, vegetables, meats, nuts, beans, all that sort of stuff, those things are not particularly stable. So their shelf lives are really short, you know, a few days, maybe a week if you're lucky. When you think about manufactured foods, like how long do they sit on the shop shelves and then how long do they sit in your cupboard for? Those things are designed to stay in the cupboard for months. But how do they manage to do that? So it's because of three main things that we're going to talk about today: sugar, emulsifiers, trans fats. We're actually not going to dive too deep on sugars. I feel like people already, sugar is demonized enough. We already know lots of the problems with sugar. And the one thing I just did want to touch on, in case you didn't see my post that I did a couple of weeks ago, so there are neurons in your gut that are literally just designed to sense sugar. And they did an experiment where they blindfolded the participants. They numbed all the taste buds on their tongues. They couldn't tell at all what they were eating, no idea. And the people that ate foods with sugar in them, dopamine was released, because that's what happens. These neurons in the gut sense the sugar. They send messages up to the brain going, oh yeah, this is the good stuff. And it releases dopamine, which makes you want to go for more. That's what dopamine does. It makes you move towards the things that you want. So even though they couldn't taste it, they had no idea what they were eating, they then craved more sugar, which is really important for us because obviously we know sugar, chocolate, sweets, those sorts of things. We know that they have sugar in, but it's the things like sauces, salad dressings. They've got lots of hidden sugar in, and we're going to end up craving more sugar even if we didn't taste it. We didn't necessarily know it was there. So yeah, I think I might end up doing a whole live or like a guide or something on sugar, because there's a lot of stuff to dive into there and a lot of misconceptions. I just wanted to bring that one up really quickly because those neurons I just talked about in your gut that are there to sense sugar, I want you to just remember those. We're going to come back to them in just a second. So the second thing that we're really going to dive deep on is these emulsifiers. So emulsifiers are actually found in soap. It's essentially what soap is. It's for bringing oil and water together, because you know that they don't sit well together, do they? If you put them both in a glass, like they sit on top of each other. So emulsifiers are like to bring those together. I'm not going to get too much into the science, but why they put them in foods is because it gives a nice smooth texture and also increases shelf life, which we need because we want to ship all the foods around the country. Now, those neurons in your gut, there are sugar sensing ones, yes. But also there are ones for sensing amino acids. So they're the things that you find in proteins. And there are also ones for sensing fatty acids. So mostly the ones that they're looking out for are omega-3. Now, basically when we're eating until those neurons have told the brain, yep, we've had enough of those amino acids. Yes, we've had enough of those fatty acids. That's essentially what's happening. We're eating not necessarily to fullness, like physical capacity of the stomach, but we're eating until we're full hormonally, because when those neurons sense the fatty acids, the omega-3s, and the amino acids, the proteins, it releases a load of other hormones that tell your body, yeah, we're done now, we're full, we've had enough. So, really important to remember all those neurons because they are all in the mucosal lining of the gut. So if you imagine like your stomach, you've got like a mucus lining on the inside of it, and they're all sitting in there. Now, if we knew a little sciencey thing about emulsifiers and we know that they're bringing oil and water together, well, guess what they're doing? Those emulsifiers literally strip away that lining of your gut. So there's literal structural damage that you're doing to your gut by eating these emulsifiers. And I don't want this to come across like preachy, like, listen to what you're doing structural damage. But when you hear that, I think there's got to be a little bit of shock there. And like, oh, I didn't realise I was literally damaging my internal organs by eating processed foods. Now, why is that a problem? Well, because when that mucosal lining is stripped, those neurons all retract further away into like the deep walls of the gut. So now they can't sense as well as they used to. Okay, so if you remember that we're eating until we've eaten enough omega-3s and enough protein and enough fatty acids, well, if they aren't there to sense that we've eaten those, well, then you just keep eating because you haven't released those hormones to say that you're full yet, because they haven't sensed that you've eaten enough yet. I hope that I've explained that well enough. But basically, if you eat processed foods, you're just going to want to eat more foods. And because of the sugar in them, it's probably going to be more processed foods that you want to eat, which really aren't doing us any favours because they don't have lots of things in that we're going to talk about right at the end. So we really don't want to be eating processed foods if we can help it. Now, if you're sitting there thinking, oh my God, that's it, I've ruined it. I've ruined my mucosal lining of my gut. Never fear, don't panic. The body is incredible and it can repair. And you know what the easy solution to do that is? To not eat processed foods. If you're not eating them, or you're not eating them often at least, or maybe you could like just stay away from them for a little bit of time, give your gut a chance to repair, and then add them back in just a little bit. But yeah, you can be repaired, so never fear. Also, just as a little aside, there's not enough evidence on this yet, so I just want to put this out there with a disclaimer straight away. But there have been some studies that have shown, because that gut lining is now gone, the food is literally sitting closer to the gut walls. And so they have got some evidence, but just not enough to say like for definite, but they think that might be the cause of some intolerances like IBS, food intolerances, things like that. So yeah, that would be really interesting, a good one to keep an eye out on to see if that really is the case, because those, those sort of things affect a lot of people, and I just wonder how many people did they affect years ago before food came in wrappers. We'll see. Okay, so we've touched on two things there. Sugar really briefly, emulsifiers, stripping the mucosal lining of the gut, making us want to eat more. And then we come on to trans fats. So, trans fats. Now, we've heard a lot of stuff in the media lately about fats. We've heard about how bad they are, about how we don't need them in the body, blah, blah, blah. Hopefully that's sort of turning a corner, because actually fats are very vital, but not trans fats, because they are a fake fat. So lots of other fats, I say a fake fat, and I say it in these quotation marks because they are found in trace elements in some animal products, but they're found in very high amounts in processed foods, and it's because they take fats that are liquid at room temperature, and then they hydrogenate them, they pump a load of stuff into them to make them into a solid or a semi-solid. So again, it's giving that nice texture, it's increasing the shelf life of these processed foods. Now the problem with trans fats is, so you've got two types of cholesterol. You've got HDL and LDL, and one like clogs up your arteries, and the other one basically takes that clogging one away from the arteries. So LDL cholesterol, I don't want to get too much into the science because, that's, if you wanted to go full science mode, I'm sure you would go out and seek this, and this just needs to be, tips and understanding. But basically, trans fats lowers the good cholesterol and raises the bad cholesterol. So not ideal. So it's clogging up those arteries. And so much so that the FDA has actually prohibited the major sources of trans fats now from being in processed foods, because it actually increases the risk of heart attack, cardiovascular disease, that sort of thing. So they're not completely gone. You still need to be on the lookout for them, but this obviously is a big issue because the FDA's got involved. So one of the ones that you might want to look out for is hydrogenated vegetable oil. Basically, it says hydrogenated anything. And there's another one I can't pronounce, or a couple I can't pronounce because they're just made up names, these things. But basically, if it's got ingredients on it that you don't recognise and they sound made up, it's probably trans fats and you probably want to stay away. Okay, so some other issues. I've gone deep on emulsifiers, stripping the mucosal lining of the gut, making you want to eat more. Trans fats, possibly increasing your risk for heart disease. But aside from those health issues, I mean, what benefit are these processed foods actually giving us? Because they don't have loads of fibre in them, which we get with whole foods. They don't have enough micronutrients, and those two things actually go hand in hand because the micronutrients tend to travel along with the fibre. So if there's no fibre, there's no micronutrients. And even if they say that they're adding them, remember we talked about before how they don't get processed by the body in the same way, so you might as well just basically not be eating them. They don't have enough omega-3, which not only is the body looking out for to tell you that you're full and that you don't need to eat anymore, but the omega-3 is anti-inflammatory. What they do have a lot of, though, is omega-6, which is pro-inflammatory. So again, it's like this whole system is working against you because it's increasing the inflammatory omega-6 and it's decreasing the thing that would take that away, which is exactly what it did with cholesterol. So they're just, all those things are just working with each other to just double or quadruple those bad effects that they're having on your health. So the thing is, manufacturers are really clever. They know all of this. This isn't like, they're not going into this blindly. They're not just making foods and going, oh yeah, I think people will like this, that would be nice. No, they know all of this stuff and they use it to their advantage. So here's just an example. Again, this isn't me trying to go all cynical and like conspiracy theorist, but we got to deal with facts. So Coke, for example. There are 3 ingredients in Coke which make a trifecta to just make you want more Coke. And the 3 ingredients are caffeine, salt and sugar. So what happens with caffeine? When you drink a lot of caffeine, it makes you want to go to the toilet, makes you wee more. And then once you've let go of the liquids, that salt really comes into play because now you've got a lot of salt in your bloodstream and not a lot of liquid. So your body goes, oh, I need to balance this out and get some more liquid in. And guess what that sugar is going to make you want to drink more of? Coke. So these manufacturers are not stupid. They know exactly what they're doing and they are just making you want to buy more products, and that is exactly why 10 companies are controlling 90% of our food distribution. So, look, I've told you all the reasons why processed foods aren't great, but let's be realistic. They're not going away anytime soon, are they? We don't live lives now where we can actually just live off the earth like we used to be able to. So we need to have a look at whether they can fit into our diets or not. Yes, they can. As I've said before, I do advocate mostly whole foods, but realistically, we have to acknowledge the fact that we are going to eat some processed foods. So my recommendation really is to try and get about 80% whole foods. Now, please don't take that as a solid number and go, right, I need to weigh out every single thing, I need to track every meal and make sure I'm eating. No, just, be conscious of it. Try and make most foods that you eat whole, and then maybe you have like, I don't know, a bit of ice cream after dinner. Maybe you have a takeaway on a Saturday night. That's cool. Just try and make most choices whole, healthy foods if you can. And if you are going to have to go for packaged goods, because that's the world we live in, that's fine. You're just going to try and look out for as minimally processed as possible. So just as few ingredients and as little processing as you can, and then you're going to get as close to those whole foods straight from the earth as possible. So the other thing to just watch out for is 74%. I've got loads of facts for you. I'm just throwing out all the numbers today. 74% of foods in the supermarket have added sugar in them. So as we just learnt about those sugar sensing neurons, watch out for that added sugar. And just a final fact to leave you with is that there are loads of studies now that show that people gain weight by eating processed foods, even when they controlled for your calorie intake. So when they compared people eating, say, 1,800 calories of whole foods and 1,800 calories of processed foods, they gained weight by eating the processed foods because the artificial sweeteners and all those horrible things that we've just talked about physically change the microbiome in your gut, and they strip away that mucosal lining in the gut. They are physically altering your gut in ways that promote obesity. So, loads of facts for you. Sounds like doom and gloom. I think the good news is that there are lots of things on the rise now. People are becoming more aware of these sorts of things. So supermarkets are providing more close to whole food options. Things like having your veg ready prepared for you. That makes it so easy for us. Lots of people don't have time now to be chopping up 5 different types of veg. That's cool. You can buy a bag of it already pre-cut up. You can buy loads of frozen veg. It's not quite as good as fresh, but it's better than not having any or eating a microwave meal instead. So just try and look out for those options if you can. Stay away from the processed foods as much as possible, but fit them into your lifestyle as you see fit. But hopefully now you've got a little bit more knowledge and you're armed with that information to help you make those choices in the future. And if you need any help with sort of understanding foods or how to fit those foods into your lifestyle, just give me a message. Hopefully I'll be able to help you out. As for next week, I've got a list like this of things that I want to talk about. But as always, if there's something particularly playing on your mind, or maybe this has sparked some ideas or some questions, send them at me. I want to make this group as valuable and as useful to its members as possible. So, you know, it doesn't have to be stuff that I'm interested in. I'm interested in a lot of stuff that isn't really useful to you guys. But I want it to be stuff that is going to be helpful for you. So let me know how I can help. Let me know if this was helpful or if you just found it a little bit miserable. And yeah, I will see you next week. See you later.